Welcome to All Sorts Podcast. Today we're setting sail on an intellectual voyage, plunging beneath the surface of the waves to explore a fascinating and, well, somewhat enigmatic vessel. Prepare to embark on a deep dive into the world of naval power as we focus on the Kuznetsov-Class Aircraft Carrier.
Indeed. For this exploration, we've gathered a range of sources, from detailed articles dissecting its technology to a pretty comprehensive overview within a naval encyclopedia.
Okay.
Our mission essentially is to navigate these waters and bring you the core insights and, frankly, the compelling details that define these unique ships.
Okay, let's chart our course right at the beginning then. The Kuznetsov class didn't just, appear out of thin air. Its story is rooted in a series of ambitious Soviet naval design projects from the late 1970s and early 1980s.
Right.
Initiatives like Project 1160, then the intriguing 1153 Oral, and finally 1143 Oral. These were some bold visions being drafted.
What's particularly striking about these early projects is the sheer scale of Soviet naval ambition. Take Project 1153 Oral, for instance.
Yeah.
It was conceived as a 72,000-ton nuclear-powered giant, capable of launching a formidable air wing of 70 aircraft using steam catapults, a Kato bar configuration.
Wow, 70 aircraft.
Yeah, but it wasn't solely about air power. It was also slated to carry a significant offensive punch with 24 vertical launch tubes for a mix of anti-ship missiles, surface-to-air missiles, and close-in weapon systems.
So like a floating airbase armed like a battle cruiser.
Pretty much. Imagine that kind of hybrid.
It sounds like they were trying to build something that could do absolutely everything. So what prevented this impressive Oral from ever, hitting the water?
Ultimately, its downfall was its very ambition. It was deemed too technologically challenging and crucially prohibitively expensive. Just too much.
The cost factor.
Always a factor. The Soviets then shifted their focus to a more pragmatic, scaled-down design, the initial Project 1143.5.
Right.
This represented a move towards a VSTOL vertical short takeoff and landing ship, closer to the 65,000-ton range with a planned capacity of around 52 aircraft.
So a considerable reduction in size and the type of aircraft it could operate then.
A very significant reduction, yes.
That's quite a pivot. And this shift ties into a unique aspect of Soviet naval doctrine, doesn't it? These weren't viewed as purely aircraft carriers in the Western sense.
Precisely. The Soviet Navy classified these vessels as heavy aircraft carrying cruisers, or TECAR.
TECAR, okay.
This designation wasn't just semantics, it profoundly influenced their design. Unlike the predominantly air-focused philosophy behind Western carriers, the Kuznetsov class was conceived with a substantial cruiser-like armament, blurring the lines between these two types of warships. It does raise a key question, really. Did this hybrid approach strengthen their fleet or potentially, dilute their core capabilities in either role?
That's a fascinating point to consider. So from this series of ambitious and adjusted plans, we ended up with two actual ships. Can you tell us their names and maybe a little about their individual stories?
Yes. The two ships of the Kuznetsov class are the Admiral Kuznetsov, which continues to serve in the Russian Navy, and the Riga.
Riga, okay.
Now, the Riga story takes an interesting turn. It was later renamed Voryag and was eventually sold to China.
Right, I remember that.
It underwent significant modifications there to become the Plan, Type 001 Liaoning. It now serves primarily as a training carrier and, well, a symbol of China's growing naval power.
So the legacy extends beyond Russia then?
Definitely. It illustrates how the legacy of this class extends well beyond the Russian fleet.
Okay, so we have the origin story. Now, let's delve into the nuts and bolts, what defines the Kuznetsov class in terms of design and its capabilities. The method of launching and recovering aircraft is a fundamental difference from those earlier Kato bar aspirations, isn't it?
Absolutely. The Kuznetsov class employs a stow bar configuration. Short takeoff, but arrested recovery.
SOBAR.
Aircraft takeoff using a distinctive ski jump ramp at the bow, gaining lift assistance that way, and are recovered using arresting wires on the angled flight deck, much like on a traditional carrier.
Okay.
This system is simpler and less costly than installing and maintaining steam catapults. But it does impose limitations on the weight of aircraft that can be launched.
So payload and fuel capacity are affected?
Exactly. It affects their payload and fuel capacity quite significantly. So a key trade-off was made there between complexity and operational flexibility.
And then there's that really distinctive feature for an aircraft carrier, a significant battery of anti-ship missiles. That's not something you typically see on carriers operated by other major navies, is it?
Not at all. What's particularly striking is the sheer scale of this offensive capability. The Admiral Kuznetsov was completed with 12 P-700 Granite anti-ship missiles designated the SSN-19 shipwreck by NATO.
Shipwreck. Okay. 12 of them.
Yes, and these are enormous missiles, each weighing around 7,000 kilograms and stretching approximately 10 meters in length.
7 tons.
Wow.
Yeah, think of it. A carrier designed not just to project air power, but also to directly engage enemy surface combatants with these massive projectiles. These aren't just for self-defense, then. They sound like primary offensive weapons. What kind of destructive power do they possess?
Well, they can be equipped with either a substantial 750-kilogram high-explosive warhead or a 500-kiloton nuclear warhead.
Nuclear capable, too.
Yes. Their range is equally impressive, reaching up to 625 kilometers, and they can travel at high supersonic speeds, Mach 1.6 at low altitude and Mach 2.5, or even greater at high altitude.
That really reflects that Soviet doctrine you mentioned, doesn't it? More self-sufficient, offensively oriented.
Exactly. More so than their Western counterparts, definitely.
That sounds like a serious threat to any opposing fleet. How are these guided to their targets, especially at such long ranges?
Initially, they utilized an inertial guidance system for the initial phase of flight, switching to active radar homing in the terminal phase to lock onto the target. They also incorporated a home-on-jam capability to counter electronic warfare. Interestingly, they relied heavily on external targeting data. This could be provided by Tu-95RC reconnaissance aircraft, K-25 helicopters, or even the Legenda satellite surveillance system.
Legenda, right.
Later, this was updated with Lotus S and GPS for improved course correction. But that reliance on external data, it really highlights the interconnectedness of Soviet naval assets in their operational planning.
So the fundamental idea was to unleash a salvo of these powerful Granite missiles to overwhelm the defenses of even heavily protected formations, like a U.S. carrier battle group.
Precisely. The Soviet strategy likely envisioned that a coordinated attack with multiple Granite missiles would saturate enemy defenses, significantly increasing the probability of a successful hit on high-value targets.
Makes sense.
However, once launched, these missiles had limited ability to adjust course independently, making them potentially vulnerable to maneuvering targets and sophisticated electronic countermeasures.
Right.
Which raises another key question. In the evolving landscape of naval warfare, how effective would such a system be against modern defensive technologies?
Good point. And what's the current status of these formidable missiles on the Admiral Kuznetsov? Are they still part of its active armament?
Well, the Naval Encyclopedia indicates that the Granite system was considered increasingly obsolete, and there were plans for its removal during the major refit scheduled for the 2020s.
Okay. To make more room for aircraft.
Exactly. The space freed up by their removal is intended to significantly expand the hangar capacity, signaling a potential shift towards a more, let's say, traditional aircraft carrier role.
Okay, so the heavy offensive missile punch is being reduced, or planned to be. What about its ability to defend itself? What kind of anti-aircraft and anti-missile systems does the Kuznetsov employ?
It's equipped with a layered air defense system. For medium-range threats, it has 4 Kinzhal SAM launchers, holding a total of 192 missiles.
Kinzhal, that's the naval Tor system, right?
Yes, the navalized version of Tor. Entered service in '89, range about 12 kilometers, speed Mach 2.5, uses rotary VLS.
Okay, and closer in.
For closer range threats, there are 8 Kortik launchers, armed with 256 missiles. These are combined gun missile systems featuring 30mm Gatling guns, effective up to 10 kilometers or so against aircraft and missiles.
Combined gun missile. Interesting.
Yeah, though notably, these Kortik systems are currently in the process of being replaced by the more advanced Pantsir systems. And finally, for very close in defense, there are 6 30mm AK-630M CIWS.
The Gatling guns.
The Gatling guns, yes. Rapid fire, capable of firing an astounding 4,000 to 5,000 rounds per minute. Effective range of up to maybe 5 kilometers against surface targets, 4 kilometers against incoming aircraft and missiles.
So a multi-layered approach seems comprehensive.
It does reflect a comprehensive strategy for ship self-defense, yes.
Now, something that really jumped out at me in the sources is that the Kuznetsov also possesses an anti-submarine warfare suite. That seems quite unusual for an aircraft carrier, doesn't it?
You're right. It is somewhat atypical for a dedicated aircraft carrier. However, reflecting its heavy aircraft carrying cruiser designation.
Back to the Takyar concept.
Exactly. The Kuznetsov is equipped with Kamovkai 27PL helicopters, specifically designed for anti-submarine warfare duties.
The Ka-27s.
Yes. And in addition, it has 2 RBU-12,000 rocket launchers with 60 missiles. These can deploy acoustic decoys to confuse enemy sonar and even create anti-torpedo minefields.
Minefields from a carrier. Wow.
And the ship itself also carries torpedo decoys and depth charges. It provides a multifaceted ASW capability.
So it really reinforces that idea of it being a more versatile, independent warship.
Definitely. More so than a purely aviation-focused carrier.
So it has the capability to hunt submarines as well as project air power and engage surface ships with missiles. That really underscores its unique hybrid nature.
Let's turn our attention to its air component. What types of aircraft was it originally designed to operate?
The original design envisioned an air group of 33 fixed-wing aircraft and 12 helicopters.
Okay.
The primary fighter bomber was the Sukhoi Su-33, which is essentially a navalized and more heavily armed variant of the renowned Su-27 flanker.
The naval flanker. Right. Later in its service life, MiG-29K multi-role fighters were also added to the air wing, which enhanced its capabilities.
MiG-29K.
For helicopters, the Kamov K-27 serves in a variety of roles: ASW, search and rescue, patrol, and even naval assault. It has the capability to carry up to 16 Marines and provide fire support.
So quite a diverse air wing reflecting that multifaceted mission profile.
Very much so.
And there were also considerations for other specialized helicopter variants to operate from it, weren't there?
Yes, the Naval Encyclopedia mentions the development of the K-29, which is an assault-oriented helicopter capable of carrying Attica anti-tank guided missiles.
K-29 for assault.
And the K-52K Katran, a heavily armed strike helicopter designed to carry Hermes anti-tank missiles.
Katran, okay.
Interestingly, the ship also has the potential to operate a very large number of helicopters, potentially up to 60 or more in a dedicated amphibious assault role.
60 helicopters, wow.
Yeah, effectively transforming into a large helicopter carrier if needed. This adaptability really highlights the flexibility built into its design.
That's a significant potential for carrying helicopters. Now let's delve into the heart of this behemoth, its propulsion system. I understand it utilizes a combination of steam and gas turbines, but there have been, shall we say, persistent reports regarding its reliability. What can you tell us about that?
That's a fair observation. The Kuznetsov is powered by a combined steam and gas turbine system. COSAG is the acronym sometimes used, though technically it's steam turbines boosted by gas turbines for high speed, powered by steam boilers. It generates a total of 200,000 shaft horsepower.
Okay, 200,000 shaft.
This allows for a top speed of 29 knots and a cruising speed of 18 knots. Its operational range is approximately 8,500 nautical miles at 18 knots, or a more limited 3,800 nautical miles at its maximum speed.
Right, and the fuel?
The primary fuel used is fuel oil, which notably has been associated with increased smoke formation, a visual characteristic often remarked upon.
Yes, the famous black smoke plumes.
Exactly. Former Northern Fleet Commander Admiral Vyacheslav Popov attributed this primarily to the use of cheaper, lower-grade fuel oil mazout, specifically.
So the prominent plumes aren't necessarily indicative of a catastrophic mechanical failure, according to him.
According to Admiral Popov's explanation, the smoke is primarily a consequence of the fuel type being burned in those high-pressure boilers. He even drew parallels to some older U.S. Navy ships that also produce significant smoke.
Interesting.
He also pointed out an interesting design feature. The fuel oil storage tanks are integrated into the ship's three-chamber anti-torpedo protection system.
Using the fuel for protection.
Yes, the idea is the inert fuel itself helps absorb the blast and fragmentation from a torpedo strike. It provides a degree of protection rated to withstand, apparently, a 400-kilogram TNT explosion. So even the fuel system has a sort of dual purpose.
That's a really fascinating and somewhat unconventional design element. What about any potential future plans for its propulsion? I recall reading about a possibility of nuclear power being considered at some point.
There was indeed a modernization plan that explored the possibility of replacing the 4 conventional boilers with 2 more compact KN-3 nuclear reactors.
Nuclear Kuznetsov.
Exactly. This ambitious upgrade would have bestowed upon the Kuznetsov the virtually unlimited operational range characteristic of nuclear-powered carriers, with the remaining boilers perhaps serving as a backup. But this significant and very expensive upgrade was ultimately canceled for financial reasons during its most recent major overhaul. Cost, again, has certainly played a significant role in shaping the Kuznetsov's evolution.
Cost seems to be the recurring theme, doesn't it? Briefly, what can you tell us about the ship's physical protection beyond the fuel tanks and its maneuverability on the open sea?
In terms of protection, the Kuznetsov features 3 longitudinal bulkheads running the length of the ship. The second of these is armored, although the exact thickness isn't widely known.
Okay.
It's also highly likely that critical areas such as the command center, ammunition storage, the kerosene fuel tanks for the aircraft, and the steering gear are further protected by additional armor plating.
Right, standard practice.
And the machinery spaces are also compartmentalized with both transverse and longitudinal bulkheads to enhance survivability in case of damage.
Makes sense. And handling.
As for maneuverability, the ship is considered to handle reasonably well. It has a turning circle of approximately 2.1 ship lengths when traveling at a speed of 14.5 knots. It's also equipped with 2 substantial 15-ton anchors located at the bow.
And evacuation.
For evacuation purposes, it carries a selection of smaller boats, commander's cutter, working cutters, even oared boats, and a large number of inflatable life rafts, around 240 according to one source.
Okay. And just before we move on to its operational history, the Variag, before its transformation into the Liaoning, was intended to have a more advanced sensor suite than Kuznetsov, wasn't it? Can you give us a quick overview of that difference?
Yes, that's correct. The Variag was slated to be equipped with the Advanced Forum Radar Suite. This was intended as a sophisticated integrated system encompassing a variety of powerful radar systems for different functions. Things like long-range air and surface surveillance, the OR-650 Podgorzoic, or top-late NATO terms. Also multiple medium-range surveillance and tracking radars, like the MR-750 Fregat MAT, top steer, and MR-350 Podcat, cross sword. Plus, advanced electronic warfare and decoy systems.
So a more complex system overall.
Yes, it highlights the intended sensor capabilities for the class, although, as we know, the Variag's final configuration under Chinese ownership reflects different priorities and different available technologies by that time.
Okay, we've now gained a pretty comprehensive understanding of the Kuznetsov-class design and its quite unique blend of aircraft carrier and cruiser capabilities. Let's now shift our focus to its operational history and how it has been perceived both in the West and within Russia. The transfer of the Admiral Kuznetsov to the Northern Fleet during the tumultuous dissolution of the Soviet Union sounds like a particularly dramatic episode.
It was a truly pivotal moment in the ship's history, absolutely.
Yeah.
In December 1991, amidst Ukraine's declaration of independence, the Kuznetsov, then based in Sevastopol, received conflicting orders.
Conflicting orders? Not ideal.
Not at all. While the newly independent Ukrainian president issued instructions for the ship to remain in port, the captain, with the backing of the Soviet Northern Fleet Command, made the bold decision to set sail.
Just left?
Pretty much. The initial destination was supposedly the Feodosia training ground, but the ultimate aim was clearly to reach the Northern Fleet's base in the Arctic, effectively preventing the carrier from potentially falling under Ukrainian control.
That sounds incredibly risky and politically charged. Were there any significant hurdles or challenges during that voyage north?
Indeed, there were considerable challenges, the most notable being the passage through the Turkish Straits, the Dardanelles, and the Bosporus.
Right, the Montreux Convention.
Exactly. At the time, the ship was sailing without complete technical documentation, with a significantly reduced crew, maybe only partially trained, and still flying the flag of the rapidly dissolving Soviet Union.
Which technically didn't exist anymore by late December 91.
Precisely. Furthermore, the Montreux Convention generally restricts the passage of aircraft carriers through these strategically important straits.
So how did they manage it?
The Russian government essentially informed Turkey that the vessel was non-operational and still technically under construction, calling it an aircraft carrying cruiser to fit the treaty language better.
Ah, the TKR designation came in handy.
That seems so. While Turkey never officially granted permission for its passage as a fully operational aircraft carrier, they also chose not to actively impede its transit, likely recognizing the very delicate geopolitical situation.
A pragmatic decision.
One could say that. The Kuznetsov eventually reached its permanent home in Vidyevo in the Murmansk Oblast later that December 1991, a very symbolic moment in the post-Soviet naval landscape.
A daring escape under extraordinary circumstances, it seems. What were its initial years of service like after arriving in the Northern Fleet? Was it immediately operational?
Well, following its official commissioning back in January 1991, the period between, say, 1992 and 1994 was primarily dedicated to extensive testing and evaluation of its various weapon systems and, crucially, the integration of its air group through annual exercises at sea, getting everything working together.
Working out the kinks.
Exactly. Then, in 1995, it embarked on its first significant operational deployment, a Mediterranean combat mission as part of a Russian carrier battle group.
Okay, first real outing.
Yes. While the embarked air wing was relatively modest in size, maybe a dozen Su-33s and some helicopters, this deployment marked Russia's first foray into projecting aircraft carrier power in a potentially contested environment since the Soviet era ended. It included port calls at Tartus in Syria and La Valletta in Malta.
So a crucial step in showing Russia still had naval aviation ambitions.
Absolutely. A crucial step in demonstrating that ambition.
So a somewhat understated entry into full operational service, perhaps. How was the Kuznetsov class initially perceived by Western naval analysts and intelligence agencies? What were their first impressions?
Initially, Western intelligence agencies designated it with various temporary names, things like Blackcom II and later the Kremlin class, before the Kuznetsov designation became standard.
Right.
There was a degree of surprise when it was revealed that the ship utilized conventional oil-fired boilers for propulsion, rather than the combined nuclear and steam CONAS system that had been initially speculated for some earlier Soviet carrier designs.
So the conventional power was a bit of a surprise.
It was. And while its conventional power plant limited its sustained deployment range compared to nuclear-powered carriers, its potential to complicate U.S. Navy anti-submarine warfare efforts in the North Atlantic was recognized as a notable factor.
Okay.
But the absence of catapults and the inherent limitations imposed by the ski jump for launching heavily loaded aircraft were also quickly identified and factored into Western assessments of its overall combat effectiveness.
They noted the payload penalty right away.
They did. More recently, especially in the last decade or so, the Kuznetsov has often been characterized as largely inactive and mired in what some sources have termed post-overhaul limbo as of 2024, reflecting serious concerns about its operational availability.
Post-overhaul limbo? That doesn't sound good. And what has been the prevailing Russian perspective on the significance and value of the Admiral Kuznetsov to their navy?
Well, from a Russian standpoint, the Admiral Kuznetsov's primary significance is often framed around its role in maintaining and developing experience in aircraft carrier operations. Critically, it's about training naval aviators capable of operating from such platforms. That institutional knowledge is vital.
Keeping the skills alive.
Exactly. The 2016 deployment to Syria, despite its limitations and the aircraft losses.
Right, we'll get to those.
That was considered by Russia as a valuable opportunity to gain real-world combat experience for its air crews and ship's company. And interestingly, even some Western experts, like those cited by the BBC, have acknowledged the importance of this operational experience.
Yeah.
Particularly when considering that in the early 2000s, only the United States and France possessed similar recent experience in deploying aircraft carriers in actual combat zones. So Russia gaining that experience was seen as significant, even by some outside observers.
Despite these perceived positives, there seems to be a considerable amount of criticism, particularly in Western sources, regarding the Kuznetsov's overall performance and reliability. What are some of the main points of contention that have been raised?
Oh, yes, quite a few. Western experts, and even some reports within Russian media, have frequently criticized the Kuznetsov for essentially never fully achieving its intended operational capabilities, and for suffering from a consistent pattern of unreliability.
Unreliability how?
Well, plagued by technical issues affecting its hull, its power plant, those boilers again, and the aircraft arresting gear. Modernization efforts have often been described as protracted and at times seemingly ineffective or incomplete. Concerns have also been raised about a potential shortage of highly qualified pilots capable of consistently and safely operating from a Stobar carrier, which is inherently more demanding than Katobar.
Right, the ski jump challenge.
Exactly. And plus the limitations on aircraft payload and fuel capacity imposed by that ski jump launch system. Some assessments have even gone so far as to rank it among the worst aircraft carriers ever built.
That's harsh.
It is, but they cite a history of poor maintenance and safety standards, often highlighted by a series of well-documented incidents, such as the sinking of its dry dock, the PD-50, and multiple fires on board.
Those incidents certainly paint a picture of ongoing and significant challenges in operating and maintaining this vessel. Could you elaborate on some of those specific mishaps that have contributed to this perception of unreliability?
Yes, there have been several notable and widely reported incidents throughout its operational history. Back in 2004, a Su-25 UTG trainer aircraft was involved in a crash landing on the carrier's deck, damaged the plane significantly. Then in 2005, two Su-33 fighter jets were lost in separate incidents in the North Atlantic, both due to a failure of the aircraft arresting gear cable snapping during recovery. One of the aircraft plunged into the sea and was lost.
Arresting gear failure. That's critical.
Absolutely critical. Then in 2009, a fire broke out aboard the Kuznetsov while it was moored off Turkey, tragically resulting in the death of a crew member due to carbon monoxide poisoning.
Fatality.
Yes. And more recently, during that 2016 deployment off the coast of Syria we mentioned, both a MiG-29K fighter and its Su-33 fighter were lost in separate landing attempts within a few weeks of each other.
2 aircraft lost on one deployment.
Yes. Both related to landing mishaps, again involving arresting gear issues in at least one case. These incidents have undoubtedly contributed heavily to the narrative of the Kuznetsov as a troubled ship.
A rather unfortunate sequence of events indeed. Finally, let's return briefly to the Varyag and its eventual transformation into the Chinese aircraft carrier Liaoning. What significant lessons or insights can we glean from its story and its subsequent service with the Chinese Navy?
The fate of the Varyag is highly instructive, I think. After years of complex negotiations, and frankly some rather convoluted logistical hurdles involving a Macau-based company supposedly buying it for a floating casino.
Right. That whole saga.
The incomplete hull was acquired by China and underwent a massive and lengthy conversion program to become the Liaoning. It now serves as a crucial training carrier for the People's Liberation Army Navy, playing a vital role in developing China's indigenous aircraft carrier operational capabilities, building that expertise from the ground up, essentially.
Using it as a stepping stone.
Precisely. And furthermore, China is now actively developing and building its own, more advanced aircraft carriers, including those employing Kato bar launch systems, specifically electromagnetic catapults on their latest Type 003 carrier, the Fujin, a capability that Kuznetsov never possessed.
So they learned from it and moved beyond it quickly.
Exactly. The Liaoning's journey underscores China's determined and rapid ascent as a major naval power, learning and adapting from the experiences and technologies of others, including, clearly, the legacy of the Soviet-era Kuznetsov class.
So as our deep dive into the Kuznetsov-Class Aircraft Carrier concludes, we've encountered a ship embodying a really unique and ambitious design philosophy, haven't we? Navigating a complex operational history marked by both aspiration and considerable challenges, and perceived through distinctly different lenses in the East and the West.
Precisely. The Kuznetsov class stands as a fascinating case study in naval architecture and strategy. It illustrates the enduring complexities of balancing diverse capabilities within a single warship and the persistent challenges of maintaining and effectively deploying advanced military technology, especially with constrained budgets.
And on that note, we've reached the end of our exploration into the intriguing saga of the Kuznetsov-Class Aircraft Carrier. We trust that this deep dive has illuminated the key aspects of these distinctive ships and their place within the broader narrative of naval history and power projection.
This certainly prompts a final thought for you, our listeners. Considering the multifaceted history of the Kuznetsov, its design intentions versus its operational reality, what fundamental lessons does its story offer about the enduring tension between ambitious technological aspirations, the practical limitations of implementation and maintenance, and, well, the ever-evolving realities of naval power in the modern era? It's definitely a question worth reflecting upon.
Indeed it is. And now, as the metaphorical engines of our inquiry cool down from this particular deep dive, we want to ignite another kind of power, the power of connection and shared knowledge. If you found this exploration into the Kuznetsov-Class Carrier as captivating as we did, please take a moment to like, share this deep dive, and subscribe to All Sorts Podcast on YouTube.
Yeah, please do.
Your engagement acts as the very fuel that propels our ship of knowledge across the vast digital seas, guiding us toward new and exciting intellectual horizons.
And don't forget that the immense ocean of All Sorts Podcast is already rich with previous deep dives. Each one is a unique island of insight just waiting for you to discover. Whether your curiosity lies in the realms of history, the intricacies of science, or the multifaceted tapestry of human endeavor, we've likely already set sail for those fascinating waters.
That's right. And for those of you who enjoy keeping the constellations of curiosity aligned across different platforms, be sure to follow All Sorts Podcasts on X, Instagram, and Threads. Envision these platforms as interconnected star systems, where inquisitive minds like yours can converge, share your own discoveries, and actively participate in the ongoing, ever-expanding conversation.
Join the community.
Exactly. Until our next deep dive into the all sorts of wonders that surround us, keep those brilliant minds engaged and keep exploring.